Hi, hello and welcome to this webinar on SEO for journalists. Thank you so much for your time to join in for this. So we are actually using this opportunity to kind of demystify what search engine optimization means for journalists, right? So we've got learned team of guest speakers for that. So a quick note before we go there. So my name is Anupam Dasgupta. I work as VP Marketing with Quintype. Quintype, of course, as most of you might know, is into the digital publishing ecosystem with its suite of SaaS products on content management system, subscription management system, audience engagement, mobile apps, and others. Right. So, having said that, we have with us today Mr. Tommi Heikkonen, who is the CEO of Fiare Consulting, and Mr. Malay Tripathi, who works as specialist SEO and data analytics for Fiare. Fiare has been Quintype's, partner in our efforts towards catering to clientele in the Europe region specifically. So, without further ado, on what Fiare is all about and the purpose of Fiare, I would like to hand over to Tommi.
Okay, thank you, Anupam, and hello everybody online. Happy to be here with you. So Fiare, just put it in very short, we've been serving media companies for over 20 years, and as I said, we are now the EU partner for Quintype, which we are rather excited about. And as for today's topic, as I said, we're going to be discussing search engine optimization related things. And I said, here with me is Malay. Malay, say hello as well.
Hello.
Right. So thanks, Tommi. So Tommi, I was just wondering last night when I was thinking about this webinar that, I know I've been reading your articles which have been coming out lately on search engine optimization for journalists. So I wanted to understand more from you what went in your mind and what was the real, motivation behind writing on this topic.
Right. So how we came up with this topic and why we do think it's relevant, it actually goes back into some practical experience. With Malay, we've been doing, or Malay has been doing quite a few of SEO checkups for our customer organizations. And what we've learned is that very often it is question about dealing with IT matters with IT people on IT departments. And then there are findings that are related to journalists. And what we learned is that then the IT department goes to the news desk and tells journalists that you should be doing this and this and this. And quite often, if you are not familiar with the content, if you don't understand the context well, people are not really happy to do stuff that they are told to do about. So, and also I went online. I did make a search with a search engine like people do when they want to find information. I searched for SEO for journalists, and I did find actually quite a bit of content, but it was very, very technology driven what we found. So it seemed like there's an expectation that a journalist should be an engineer in order to do things in favorable for search engines. Whereas in reality, we know that there's so much of the SEO is about technology, but there's actually very many very simple things that a journalist can do in order to improve the performance of the articles. So we decided to focus only about what a journalist can do, what the journalist can achieve by doing certain things in a certain way. So that's how we came up with this whole concept. And the purpose of this session is not that we would be showing off how much we know about SEO related matters. We want to focus now, we want to ignore the technology as much as possible and really think this from the standpoint of an individual journalist who is writing articles and content online. The same logic, by the way, applies to anybody who is writing anything online, but this one is specifically for journalists' standpoint.
Sure. So there we have the call out very clearly from Tommi on what really prompted him and which kind of audience he wants to address for this webinar. So before we go there, Tommi, what is search engine optimization and how does this thing really work at a high level overview? How does this work?
Yes, so the fundamental concept of search engine optimization is actually really simple, but it's been mystified a lot. And I think one of the reasons is that it is a result of so many small aspects. Very many of them are very technical, and which we don't deep dive in here right now, but let's go that much into practicalities so that what really it means. So in this context, first of all, what is a search engine? So search engine pretty much equals Google. About 88% of all the searches that are done on internet are done by Google search. And what that means in practice is that Google gets to dominate what information people will find when they go online. And the stock market evaluates that position worth over $1 trillion. So it's been considered as a quite important thing. Now, what Google does in practice, they have these small pieces of software that goes out in internet, and they go through each and every website that are out there. And Google is willing to promote sites that are presenting the information in a user-friendly way. Now, who defines what is a user-friendly way of presenting information? Surprise, it's Google. So they publish a criteria, and where they say that if you present the information this way, we think it's a user-friendly thing, and then we'll promote it. And the same goes opposite way. If you don't do it this way, we will not present it on Google searches, and that means that in practice this kind of information doesn't get too many viewers. So that's in a very nutshell what search engine is, and search engine optimization is meeting this Google criteria.
Sure. So of course this ties up with the way journalists operate. So your thoughts on why should journalists really care about search engine optimization?
Yeah. So first of all, the basic attitude should be like, what can I win with this? Sometimes it's being thought of something that am I getting punished on certain things, but there's quite a lot to win. So this is an opportunity. And in online contexts, how are journalists evaluated today? There are many different metrics out there, but one of them is the amount of readers that their articles get. And so by doing certain simple things in a simple way, one can get simply more readers to the articles over less readers. And in generic, I would say, what is the point of creating articles if the aim is not to get them widely read? So for a journalist, there's lots to win, and I said most of the things are very simple.
Right. For the community we are in terms of the digital publishers, so the business goals of the digital publishers are probably the metrics by which they are measuring their activities, or the priorities also have changed a bit with the advent of things like SEO, right? So how do you look at it? What's your perspective on that?
Well, one thing is that SEO is a moving target all the time. So basically, whatever we present today might be outdated after a few weeks, though a lot of the principle will remain the same. So, and one good question is, why is that? Why do they change the criteria? Well, the answer for that is simply that because the world around is changing a lot. One example from the past would be, for example, that when mobile internet came around, people started to browse websites on their mobile devices. Then Google came up with first they announced it in advance that they will start to rank sites based on how they are presenting information on mobile screens. And then there was certain lead time, and after a while, if your site didn't look good on mobile, it would get really bad ranking, and your content wouldn't come up there, even though your content would have been wonderful. So those kind of constant changes in place. So that's why the change will be around, and one will just, it's good to adapt to it, if I put it like this.
Sure. Right. So of course, things like search engine rankings and web traffic, organic traffic, all of those come into the context then, isn't it, in terms of the priorities which a digital publisher will be looking at?
Absolutely. The metrics are quite many, but then from the standpoint of individual journalists, it would be simply the metrics will improve automatically if they just follow certain guidelines on their daily work. So I think even the journalists shouldn't focus too much on the metrics, where they would just do the job like they've been doing before, just remembering a couple of details while doing it.
Sure. So while we are in the midst of this interesting discussion with Tommi, I would call out to all attendees, please feel free to type your questions if you're getting any while we are discussing this, and we would be happy to address those. So in the same line of thought, Tommi, we were discussing about, how the journalists' work has changed. So how do you see their day-to-day work or the way they operate having really changed with the advent of SEO, or not changed for that matter? So how would you comment on that?
Well, looking back at the journalists' work, if we go back to the print age, of course, then the whole work, how news desk and how journalists work was very different at the print age. You had certain deadlines for articles for print that would be, for example, once a day. You would need to deliver what you had in there. Whereas we are now 24/7 world. News are coming out constantly. They are published out constantly. An article that has been published will be updated later, or it's good to update them then later. And you can link articles between each other and do those kind of things.
Right. So you've been mentioning about the few things which a journalist can take care of to make his or her content more visible, get more eyeballs. So what do they really have to learn? Because SEO appears to be a very technical subject, and journalists may not necessarily like that flavor, right? So how do you look at it? What kind of learning does a typical journalist have to go through to be able to adapt to the few changes you've been referring to?
Well, we have come up with a list of a list of things to consider, and we'll be going through, or Malay will be going through it in a minute in the whole list there, and but it includes things like including the the main content of the article in the first two sentences, or avoid using very complex sentence structures when you create articles, and then even the total length of the articles. How we know from the statistics that there are certain word counts that work more effectively than others. So they would be these kind of things.
So what that really means is that for very highly technical things, they could still borrow help from their IT departments or the technical colleagues. And for themselves, they have to learn a few, a few placeholders where they have to put in certain terms, which Malay would be presenting certain tags or certain keywords into their content so that they are better placed in terms of the content, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the IT department, or it can be anybody else, can also help with things like what kind of topics one should create an article about, because it's public information what are the trending Google search terms. So sometimes an effective way is to simply write an article that somehow relates to a very popular Google search, or tie it with your local context, for example, and that may give you an article topic that may become really successful quite easily.
Sure. So a linked thought, and this thought came from some reading I was doing online recently. So journalists, do they really have to look at changing the writing style to accommodate these little changes which you're talking about?
I would phrase this thing a little bit differently. When you say have to, it sounds like something unpleasant.
Yeah.
So I would more say, put it this way, that journalists have opportunities out there that by doing some really simple things are very low-hanging fruits for them. So yes, indeed, some of them would include enhancing a little of the writing process, but it might be really worthwhile to do it.
Sure. So, I'm just thinking in the shoes of a journalist, I do all the things which, let's say, Malay is going to present, and, I take help from my colleagues from IT to do the more technical stuff. But then how do I know if I'm on the right track after doing all this? I think it again points back to the metrics we were talking about, but that's what it is, isn't it? That how would a person, a journalist, really track that, hey, I'm on the right track or not?
Well, the most simple metric would be simply the amount of readers for your articles. So that you should be tracking anyway, always. So simply, if you see that your articles are getting more readers, you are probably doing things in a right way. But then there are also other metrics, but that would be the most straightforward, the most simple.
Yeah, sure. So while we're talking about the keywords and the various on-page parameters, etc., for SEO, how do you see technology stack? Like, for instance, choice of CMS, for example, impacting SEO for a publisher.
In principle level, it actually don't have to mean a lot. Or how could I say, a lot of it goes to the technical part, sort of like the page download speed and those kind of things. They might have quite a bit of effect. But if we think from the standpoint of an individual journalist, maybe the biggest thing is that they should be using tools that makes them easy to do these certain things which are good for SEO. And why it is important is that if it's very difficult or complex, if they need to stop something and go somewhere else or do many steps in order to add, for example, tags or meta information of an article, then very easily what happens is that it doesn't get done. So if it's made easy, it very more likely gets done, and then the reward will come.
Sure. So you're saying choice of a tech stack like a convenient, easy to use CMS could actually be an enabler for smooth SEO, is what you're saying, right? So to enable adherence to smooth, good SEO practices in a smooth, easy manner.
Yeah. So I would say that a good CMS will help the journalist to focus on the writing process and so that they don't need to think too much of the other things. I would put it this way.
Absolutely. I think that puts it perfectly, because they do what they are best at, and the tech takes care of the rest. So while you were speaking, Tommy, I saw this question which has come up from Avinash. Thanks, Avinash, for the question. He's actually saying how to train the print journalists to SEO. Just give some basic ideas to follow. So I think, of course, your perspective on that. And I think this actually sets up as a perfect precursor for the slides to follow. But before that, your perspective on that, Tommy.
I also agree. This is a fantastic question. And that exactly is why we are doing this webinar and some of these writings that we've done. Because if the whole approach is that you try to train a print background journalist into IT engineer, it doesn't sound attractive. and if you are using tons of different kind of abbreviations or TLAs or FLAs like we like in IT, them being 3-letter acronyms or 4-letter acronyms. So that is going to be a very big pushback. Now, for print journalists with print background, I would really now focus only on these things that we are presenting and try to ignore the tech stuff as much as possible, because print background journalists understand well things like the length of an article and things like that, and those are actually quite pleasant things. They are really good and valuable things. So just the main point would be, don't scare them with tech stuff when it doesn't add value for them.
Sure. Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I guess you hit the nail on the head. I think a couple more questions have come which are related, and I will then quickly pass it over to Malay for the slides. So one question comes in from Maria Paz Lopez saying, which length is better for headlines? I mean, number of words. You mentioned word counts for the whole article that works best. Which are those? So Maria, just hold on. Malay is going to get into a slightly deeper dive on this in the slides. And there's another question from Abhijay on timeline for SEO to show impact, which is a golden question. Abhijay, I can tell you, having been in marketing, that when will SEO show impact is a golden question. But I leave both of these questions open at this point of time, and invite Tommy and Malay on the slides.
Yes, so yeah, I think maybe it's good if Malay now will present the slides. Yes. And then we'll see what questions are unanswered after them.
Sure. Over to you, Malay.
Hello. So, Tommy mentioned about SEO, and he mentioned about how Google plays such a vital role today. I mean, 88% of searches are actually Google's. We have Yandex, we've got Baidu, we have Bing. But Google is essentially what drives, and for good reason also, because Google has matured this whole process so much over the years. Now, while we're talking of search engines, we talk of terms like artificial intelligence, machine learning, semantic cloud, semantic indexes, and so many other technical terms. But what does this really mean? So, if we try to put it very simply, what it means is that Google learns from people. If you really want to understand in a very simple English word, Google is like a child. The child learns whatever is spoken in his environment. So like that, Google or any search engine learns from what it finds. It doesn't create its own content. It doesn't create anything. It doesn't learn. It doesn't imagine anything. It just learns from what people speak. So I think, it makes a lot of sense that we address search engines like we would address a child. We look at the environment of the child, we see how the child has grown, and then we address the child accordingly. So what does this mean in our context? When we're writing copies as authors, as bloggers, as journalists, what it means is we are writing for our reader base, but we are also writing for those who are going to read it online. Essentially, it means that we are also writing for search engines. So it's important that we understand how the search engine is going to read it also. One thing we must remember, aside from the so-called direct readers of our content, we have those readers who search for content and find us. And that's the whole topic of our discussion today, search engine optimization. Just to cut down the technical jargon, we keep it very simple. So first of all, you write very simple, you write clear and precise. The general mass of the public do not use very high sounding words. For example, here we see comprehensible can be simply replaced with clear. Meticulous could be replaced with precise. So while we need to have artistic language, we also need to understand that search engines understand what the base common denominator is really understanding. So first point is clear and precise phrases, short sentences. Then the structure of the sentence itself. So while we have talked about the phraseology, now we're talking about the structure. So if you remember, if you have studied English literature, you might have heard of authors like Charles Dickens, who would write one whole paragraph in one sentence. So while that may make for very good literature, search engines get confused. They don't really understand that level of English. So your content may get derated somehow. So try to break it down into shorter structures, shorter and simpler phrases. Yeah. Yes. Now, see, now here we have to understand a little bit how Google reads or any search engine reads. It tries to go through your content very fast and tries to understand what it is talking about. Now, from a journalistic perspective, imagine there's a news, Lewis Hamilton wins the 2021 title. Now, this is going to be a news and hundreds of people are going to write about it. Now, which is the best news? The search engine is going to go through all these articles within a few seconds. I mean, hundreds of articles in a few seconds, it will read all. So it has to decide which has to go to the top. So while it may be very nice to introduce the topic, it'll be much more prudent to introduce the news right up front, a left bias as we call it. So try to introduce the topic as soon as possible in your writing. Then it should be catchy. It should be catchy, it should be precise. So short definitely goes along with it. The titles really need to be, catchy from the perspective of how an ordinary person understands. So sometimes we may have very interesting sounding words, but they may not, the search engine may not understand it. So our titles, everything, because if you remember, I'm sorry for introducing a little bit of technology here. when the search engines start listing your articles, when the user types it out on Google and you see that blue letter out there, it has a limitation of only 50 or 60 characters. Beyond that, everything is truncated. So you need to write in these 50 characters, which translates to maybe 5 or 6 words. So that's a limitation that technology imposes upon us. So therein, you should use the important phrases or important keywords that you want to introduce.
So Hamilton wins F1 race would be a short and catchy headline.
Yes, instead of saying, title recovered by Hamilton. Yeah. Because anyone who's searching for Hamilton will lose out on this.
Okay.
So your article will go a little lower in the rankings. Yes. Now this is a little bit of what we call technical skullduggery that we're using here. That sometimes, for every topic on earth, constantly people are writing a lot of stuff. Because of that, what happens is there's a lot of noise out there in that sense. There's a newspaper, you may take a cutting and keep it in your journal, but that doesn't happen on web. Things keep moving very fast. So if somehow or the other we need to republish the article, then it is important that we refresh the article a little bit. Now here I'd just like to talk a little bit about how Google sees this stuff. One of the ranking factors for Google is the freshness of the content. Now, if your news is relevant and you think that it should stay in publication, then you need to republish it after a while by changing the details a little bit so that it doesn't get flagged as a duplicate or anything. At the same time, it maintains the interest of the reader.
So if we compare to the print world, you wrote the article and then bang, it was gone. But right now, even you have published it still in front of you in your mind, sort of like you want to change it a little bit and add something onto it so that it becomes fresh or remains fresh.
Yes. So you change the titles a little bit, to translate into actionable points. You change the title a little bit, you change the description of the article a little bit, and maybe rearrange a paragraph or so.
Yes.
Now, this was one question that somebody had asked about the length of the articles. Now, please don't go by numbers here. What we are referring to is a statistical, a statistical possibility. Now, Google, before I get into this description, I would like to talk a little bit about how Google sees content. In the 90s and 2000s, when Google and other search engines came up, Yahoo, Yandex, when all these search engines were still evolving, they used to read everything, index everything, and try to publish anything related to keywords. Okay, you're talking about car, it doesn't matter what you're talking about. Is it car maintenance or car driving or buying car? The word car was sufficient for search engines. But over the years, with the introduction of artificial intelligence and large data centers, this process has become a lot more sophisticated. So with this, we come to the topic of semantic search. Nowadays, search engines don't search for words or articles, they search for meanings. Search engines are all about meanings now. So accordingly, news would get categorized in one bucket, technical articles in another bucket, health articles in another. This is like, meaningful searches, semantic searches. So depending on the category and the type of article you're publishing, the length of the article would vary. Now, this number that we have published here, 1200 to 1800, is a statistical look at all the articles which have ranked at the top. So this article length of 12 to 1800 is what is getting maximum traction on search engines. But again, if your article is, if there is a lot of content to write about, for example, refugee crisis in Europe, you're not going to describe it in one paragraph of 500 words or so. You want to write more on it. It could go up to 3000 words. Provided it remains relevant, you can exceed this so-called limit also. But in that case, you need to break the article into number of pages, paginate the article, and communicate to the search engine how it is going to be. So search engines are looking for meanings. This is a statistical number.
So looking at successful articles, they've been typically bit on these lengths.
Yes.
Yeah. So if we repeat still, so if you have a wide topic, if you need to write an article of the literature in Europe all time, yes. So you don't put that in 1800 words. No. So is it a bad idea to write an article like that, or is there something you can do about it?
Now this is a very nice question actually. So if you're right, say for example, taking your example of literature in Europe, you have various segments to it, you have various colors to it. Yeah. Such an article, just as you mentioned in the beginning, Google is about communicating information to the user, and the information is not restrained by how Google reads it. Yeah. And the idea behind search engines is to get you the best possible, the best possible article. So if the article is, say, going into 10,000 words, we need to be a bit prudent here. You need not change the article at all. You break it down into subtitles. You break the content down into smaller buckets, and then give it suitable headings and give it different pages. That's a little bit of technical, adjustment that you need to make, which is what you would do otherwise also. If you're writing a 10,000 word article in a newspaper also, you would put subheadings to indicate what each section is talking about. So here for the search engines, you just break it into a number of pages, and then you indicate exactly what the sequence is going to be.
How about put it into series on articles, make it 3 or 4 articles that are related to each other?
That is also another possibility. Because in that case, you can use it as a series of articles being published as fresh content.
Yes.
So that depends on how you want to show it. So if you want to put it as one article, you paginate it, otherwise you publish it as a number of articles. And in this way, give maximum clarity for the search engine to understand. Now, one more thing I would like to add to this is search engines are reading through your articles to understand the meaning. So you should not become fearful that you want to compress it to this and cut out the meanings and, use very short language to compress it here. If you can do it meaningfully, like we used to write these précis in our English classes, you can do that. But if it is not possible, you need not fear. You write in your own, flowing style, but make sure it is all meaningful, and you break it down into subheadings.
Right.
Malay, I have a question here. So yeah. You've been touching the point of search intent, right? So if, for example, I'm sorry, I'm also getting a little technical, but couldn't stop myself here. So if, for example, the user is searching for a real estate related news just to read about the regulations in real estate versus someone is actually looking for a purchase, right? So if a blogger is writing on real estate, for example, besides the usual keywords, what help can he get to make sure that he's catering to the intent for the purpose for which he or she is writing?
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. So this is where we come to the knowledge aspect of, since you talked about the search intent, we are talking about what the user really wants to read. So just like we mentioned, see, search engines are now getting a little more intelligent. So you need not do anything artificially. You need not need, like in previous days, there was a practice of keyword stuffing. Buy cars, buy blue cars, buy Mercedes cars, blue in color. Now this is obsolete. Google, in fact, penalizes these practices. So what you need to do is write in your own style. Of course, you see, this is a little bit of technical. This is a little bit technical again. You need to understand what are the words related. For someone who's purchasing an apartment, say I'm living in Helsinki and I want to purchase an apartment in Helsinki. There are certain terms I would use. Purchase an apartment in Helsinki, closest shopping places, closest railway stations, transportation points. So these are certain meaningful words which are associated with a purchase. So as a writer of an article, you need to understand your own category a little bit and try to use these words in your article copy so that you are able to communicate very clearly that your article is about purchasing an apartment and not about constructing an apartment or about apartment regulations.
So can you just rely on your common sense, sort of like when creating the article, sort of like it's not a very difficult, complex thought process to write about, apartments nearby railway station or something like that?
Yes, actually, search engine, writing for search engine is a lot more about common sense than technology.
Yeah.
Because search engines are now so sophisticated that they have made it actually easier for people to write their articles. In previous days, like in the early part of 2000, you really had to get into the technical wizardry, keyword stuffing, writing key phrases. Now you don't need to do that. You really need to make it a very good writer copy, a copy that makes good reading sense. A little bit of intelligence is required, like Tommi mentioned here. Yes, you need to have, an understanding of your domain.
Yes. Yeah, but that's quite so the search engine does understand the context and the content.
Yes.
So you don't need to play around too much with the sort of keywords. You just write it as it is in a plain, simple way, and the search engine will understand it, and then it will present it when people search on that topic.
Yes. Now that's the keyword. Plain and simple way.
Yeah.
You don't try to use many. What we call you don't throw the thesaurus at the user.
Because in the old days it used to be so that there were these kind of tactics how you sort of pretended to present your information to search engine, but that's gone. Yes,
that's gone now.
Yeah, so now you just go plain simple and write it as it is.
Yes.
So
one like a little bit of advice I would like to say is if you are, say for example, you want to write an article on purchasing apartments. It's not, so what you do is you think what you have in mind and search for it on a search engine, not just Google. Search on Baidu, search on Yandex, search on Bing, and try to see what are the articles that are ranking at the top. Go through it before you start writing. Have a look. It's sad to say, but the field of creativity is not so much about creativity anymore. It's also about simplicity. As famous scientists said, that if you can't communicate to a 5-year-old child, you really don't understand the topic yourself. So it should be communicated very simply. You can do a little bit of benchmarking, go through other people's writings and see how they're writing, because there's no one on earth, not even Google engineers really know how Google is working, because it's all in buckets. But one thing we know for sure is that good writing practices are rewarded by Google. Besides, keeping all the other factors constant, like technology and structuring of websites and other things.
So, but that's an interesting topic. If we think about the work of a journalist, so you're saying that before you start writing your article, go and Google and see what others have been written about it and what kind of articles are ranking high.
Yes.
And then get inspiration from them.
Yes.
Okay.
Don't plagiarize. Plagiarism is punished.
Yeah.
But you should try to understand the style. You should try to understand the vocabulary, because that's the vocabulary which general masses are using.
Yeah, but that's, by the way, another interesting. So what happens if you go and copy text from somewhere else? What happens then?
Oh, there's a plagiarism penalty from Google.
Yeah.
Your content gets flagged. Your engineers will come and tell you the next day that Google has blocked your article.
So that's something you wouldn't, in journalistic sort of like metrics, you wouldn't do it anyway. But for SEO, it's also really bad idea to copy something directly. Yes,
absolutely. So now Google has, because it has gone into semantic search, so everything is now related to best practices. So you wouldn't do this as a good journalist. You wouldn't do this as a good web writer.
Yeah. All right. That was a longish answer to this one.
So
yes.
Malay, back to your rest of the points you said.
Excuse me? Didn't hear you.
Back to the rest of the presentation. We have a few questions coming in, so I just wanted to call out the time as well. So
okay, well, let's move on. I think but next one is an interesting topic as well.
Clickbaiting. Yes. Is it good or bad? Short answer, it's good. It's fun.
So what do you say, people who find them irritating? Sort of like, why don't you just tell it in the headline? Why do you make me click? So what would be?
Oh, there are always Puritans in the society, but society is about general masses. So statistics indicate that catchy headlines get more clicks than simple headlines.
But would it be fair to say that some topics are more natural in clickbaiting way, like this 5 ways to speed up your computer, whereas don't do this on your first date is not so natural as clickbaiting headline. It's just more irritating.
Yes.
So choose your style.
Choose your style. Again, everything is subjective.
Yeah.
But this is just a general guideline.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is a little more technical stuff. You would SEO, as I said, as Tommi also mentioned previously, is a bridge between technology and content writing. So you need somebody who can tell you what is trending topic. Of course, as a writer, you would definitely have a very good idea about what's trending. There are tools which tell you which are the most trending topics, like there's Google Trends, there's Google Keyword Tool, there are Moz tools, SEO tools, which are going to help you. So some of these tools you could utilize. Then appropriate keywords. This is a little more technical, but I think we need to understand this a little bit. Every article, if you're using a CMS system or if you're using any backend for writing journals, for writing articles, there are these tags, meta description, meta title. So this is the place where you type your keywords. Keywords essentially the topic that you're going to talk about. Hamilton wins F1. You may write a whole copy about the tricks that he played to win the title, but in this title, you just write Hamilton wins F1. Yep. So tagging, meta description, meta titles. This is not something that a user reads directly, but he reads it indirectly. So as we have shown here in the graphic here, this title goes in your HTML, which your CMS provides you, or any backend that you're using for writing out. It shows up in the search engine when someone types your article. For example, here we see Texas court says Fort Worth Hospital. So people could be searching for Texas Fort Worth Hospital, ivermectin, COVID. So these keywords are all here, and you can see they show up in the meta title. So this is how it looks in a search engine page. Linking. Now, this is a very search engine related practice. So in the old days of newspapers, if you remember, you used to have top news of the day, red headline or blue headline, and then, all the headlines in big bold letters. That role has now been taken over by internal links. So you may have a news page where you link all your articles. This is also related to editors. This is more of an editorial thing than a journalistic thing. So editors who want to, you can create a flow within your website. So if you have an article on real estate, apartments, you can also talk about visiting places. So, you're talking about apartments in New Delhi. You can also talk about scenic places in New Delhi if you have an article like that, because they're all related to the keyword New Delhi. You can put internal links there and create a meaningful flow for the user. In this way, you improve the consumption of your website. And social sharing, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and LinkedIn, and what else? When you're writing, you're sharing. Be social, be sociable. You used to talk from your windows to your neighbors. Now you talk through your Facebook windows.
Yes. And how about then having a professional presence for your own personal presence in social media channels? Would that be recommendable?
Oh, certainly. While search engines do not account for social media traffic, because social media can be used to spam also, but it's a very good source for getting traffic to your articles. So you should have a professional personality as well as a personal personality on your social media accounts. As a professional, as a person, you should be a human being. You're in social media, you're not a publisher anymore. In social media, you're talking to people. So while you're talking to social media, put it in a more conversational way, not in a very artistic way, but in a very conversational language, and link back to your articles to get more traffic to your pages.
So you become a media yourself, actually.
Yes, you advertise yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, meta descriptions. Of course, this is more technical. This is something that shows up in the red box that we are showing. This is a meta description. This is in itself not a ranking factor. Google will not give you credit for writing good description, but it gives you a good click-through rate. If I have seen your page in my search ranks, I would like to know what your article is talking about. We have a character limitation of 160 or 170 here. So, like I said previously also, left bias, you put all your important keywords right at the top. In one line, you communicate what your article is going to talk about. And last but not the least, don't get too artistic with images or other comments. Like now I'm talking from our personal experience. We're doing work for many clients. One of our clients had a very heavy page. It wasn't loading. We found out the reason: too many GIFs. The page looked very nice, but on probably a 5G plus connection. On a slower connection, the page just would not load, and Google would penalize it. So use images, but don't put too many colored elements out there.
And that was a customer who had put quite a lot of effort on SEO related
Yes.
matters otherwise, and then this couple of heavy elements pretty much ruined the whole publication SEO. Not only this one article.
Yes. So one point to add to that last slide, that use images in your articles and tag those images. People like to interact. Now there's like an unofficial statistic which says that approximately 50% of the searches now are image searches. And that's why Google even puts images now up there with the text searches. So if you're searching for apartments in Delhi, you will find images of apartment blocks out there first. So images are extremely important. Put images in your articles and tag them, describe those images so that your article gets searched in images also.
Still about the heavy elements, what about if you don't know if an element that you plan to use is heavy or no? If you don't know what to do?
Oh, so there are so here you need a little bit of help from your technical team. This very simple rule: if the images are static, they're going to be light. There are now a number of technologies which are available, user-friendly tools, which can compress your images, make them short. Your technical team can definitely help you. You can send them, hey, I want this image, and they can get you the best of the images in the lightest possible sizes.
Exactly. So then you just go and ask somebody if it's okay to use that particular table or even GIF or something if you choose to use.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thanks.
So we've got quite a few questions. In fact, some of them relate to your slides, Malay. One of them actually calls out which are the best SEO practices for social media. This comes in from Hafizi Idris. Thanks, Hafizi. So, Malay, would you like to comment on that?
So,
yeah, the best. Just go ahead.
Yeah. So, see, social media is a complete beast in itself. Like I said, because our seminar is mainly dealing with SEO for the websites itself. If we want to talk about SEO for social media, I would just say that use very communicable style, be more graphic. Social media is all about images and videos. Be more graphic, talk in a conversational language, keep it short. No 30-minute videos anymore. In the 2000s, 30-minute videos were the biggest on Facebook. By 2010s, it was down to 10 minutes. Now it's maybe 1 or 2 minutes maximum. People have short attention spans. Keep everything short in bite-sized snippets, and make sure that you link everything back to your article.
Sure.
Don't give them too much in social media. You don't want people to read on Facebook. You want them reading on your website.
Right. Now, another question again, this is from Avinash. Thanks, Avinash. What to do with some clickbaiting headlines which do not have any meaningful content? Headlines are misleading. Why do search engines promote such articles?
Oh, so please understand, if you see some spammy content coming up on search engines, please understand that in a short while it will be gone. Search engines are very smart. So we do see some clickbaits which have nothing to do with the article. So it's my bad. In the beginning, I should have mentioned that clickbait must also be genuine. If you're talking about 7 ways to fix your car in winter, you should be talking about 7 ways to fix your car. Then you should be selling cars in that article. That is a clickbait. Then that's a black hat practice, and Google will penalize your site for many, many days to come. So while it is happening, these are some of the outliers which managed to slip through the Google algorithm. So
don't try to be smart, or don't try to fool Google.
Don't cheat.
That's probably a very, very good principle. Don't try to cheat.
Don't cheat.
So you are well off.
Yeah, in business, in relationships, and on
search engines.
Don't try to cheat.
Yeah. that's very good. We'll make a slogan out of that. So
As long as you're providing genuine value is what you're saying, Malay.
Absolutely.
So, which brings us to another question. This is from Navneel, who says, in terms of content and structure of articles, do we need to keep anything in mind for better SEO? While Tommy and you have already covered some of it, but back to both of you, if you want to add something on that.
So while you're writing an article from the perspective of SEO, so I can mention a few points. One is always keep a track of the trends. Don't be disappointed if you write about, vegetarian food in Africa, because very few people are searching for it. So probably you have reached the top of all the people who are searching. You have probably reached all your readers. So don't be disappointed if you see low traffic. But if you're writing on something like stock markets in Asia, certainly you should be targeting very high traffic, but there will be heavy competition. So while you're writing for SEO, make sure to keep this thing in mind. Introduce your topic right up front, put nice sketchy titles, and keep the content concise. If it's a very hot content, if it's a very popular content, keep it concise, keep it short, introduce your topic right up front. Don't take a long time to introduce it. This is not a newspaper which people will buy and then read at leisure. This is web. While you are writing, there will be hundreds of others also writing the same thing. And by the time you go out to rank, 10 others would have already ranked up there. So be fast, be concise, introduce right up front. Keep a left bias. Try to introduce it much earlier.
Sure.
So how about this popular searches, say weather? So weather is a very, very popular search, and it's quite difficult to get big part of traffic coming from the weather search. But is there something you could do to get a share of it to your publication?
That is a bit of a long-term practice. You need to build up a niche in weather, for example. Yeah. If you're talking about weather, you can also talk about weather for the impact of weather on children, impact of weather on growers, or something like that. Add a little more value. Okay. Simply talking about snow front moving towards Finland everyone is talking about it. But snow front moving, fishermen better beware on the Baltic Sea.
Okay, but that's a really handy way to put it. So just have your own angle of the topic.
Exactly.
And then still use the topic while you write.
Yeah. So when you do that, you will not get immediate search, but you will build up a reputation for adding value. And that means that people will come to your article more often. Your article will start ranking a little more. So there are direct ranking factors and there are indirect ranking factors. Direct ranking factors are all these titles, keywords, and your date of publication, freshness of content, etc. But indirect factors are how much is your page consumed. I came to your page and I consumed it for 10 minutes versus I went to your rival and I consumed for 30 seconds. Google understands that your article has more value. If it happens over a period of time consistently, then Google thinks that you are more valuable than your competitor. And then you naturally start ranking higher. So this is an indirect ranking factor.
Sure. So that's a very interesting point, Malay. I mean, not just discovery of your content, but user engagement as well. I think that's a wonderful point you brought up. But in the interest of time, I'll go back to the questions, quite a few again. Maria Paz Lopez says again, as a staff journalist of a well-known news media outlet, is it still advisable to have a personal professional website to promote your articles?
Okay, now this is a bit of a controversial topic. This depends on corporate policies. It depends on also journalistic policies in your area of operation. But on web, it is always beneficial to have a personality. If you are doing social media, see, social media is all about personalities. No one wants to talk to a Fiare. You're talking to Tommi and Malay. You're not talking to Fiare. So you see, you're getting the drift. Social media is all about light-hearted conversations, consumable content. So you can have a personal professional. You know, for example, you could be Maria from Times of India or Maria from Hindustan Times or something, and then you could publish. But make sure that then you're not publishing your personal opinions as professional opinions. So that distinction you have to maintain. Certain journalistic ethics you have to follow there.
And I think just very down-to-earth example, I think here in Finland, where I consume my local media, so all of the journalists of the main publications do have a profile. So when I read an article on newspaper, I'll very likely it will come to me on Twitter at the later same day, shared by the same journalists. Yes. And that seems to be working really, really well.
Yes, use of Twitter, for example. Twitter is the best, actually best platform for sharing news items. So what really happens is, if you see, for example, like I'll talk about how I operate. You know, I have to follow Google on an hourly basis, literally. So you don't have Google tweeting out anything. You got Mueller quoting from there. You got someone else. There are like 5 or 6 engineers who are tweeting different aspects of Google searches. They're all doing it on a professional capacity. They're all verified accounts, but they are people. And you can see as soon as they tweet, people start conversing. You know, what nonsense is this? Core Web Vitals. Earlier, you told us that images are so important. Now, when we are putting big images, you say Core Web Vitals, page speed is important. So, you know, this is really unfair on your part. And then these engineers are able to converse. So as a personality, if you are tweeting your news item and then linking them back to your page, because on Twitter, you can't really say, okay, just a news house has tweeted. That's a bit impersonal. If you're tweeting it with your personal twist, because eventually it's you who's writing the article. It's not your newspaper which has written. You are a person.
Right. So going back to another question which Maria had earlier around length of headlines, number of words in headlines. Is there a recommendation for that?
There's no recommendation for it. No technical recommendation as such. Google does not reward or penalize any headline size, but you should keep it readable. The headline shouldn't be so long that it fills up the entire page.
Right. Now, quickly coming to the question which I refer to as the golden question. Over what timeline would you expect SEO to create an impact in visibility of someone's work? Let's say journalistic work in this context is a question from Abhijay. So how would you respond to that, Tommi and Malay?
Would you like to answer this?
Well, it's I think there's no simple one truth to that one. So it will build up over time. And would it be fair to say that you want to be searching for trends? If you notice a little trend, little up curve, then you are probably doing things right, and then the curve will get steeper and steeper. And whereas opposite as well, if you're now noticing a trend going downwards, then you may want to consider what you are doing. So would that be a fair way to put it in your opinion, Malay?
Absolutely, because there is no one answer to it. But still, if you want a mathematical, numerical answer, if you do everything right, meaning, you know, let me just categorize it. We have on-page SEO, which we talked about right now, all the editorial related SEO. Then we have technical SEO related to all the technical wizardry that goes behind in the systems. And then we have marketing, PR SEO, which is we sometimes call backlink SEO or, you know, profile building. If you do everything correctly, you may expect to see results as soon as 3 months. But like I said, SEO is a sum of the parts. Not everything works. Your article may be very good, but it's too long. You make it too short, the image is too heavy. So something. But if the sum of the parts is okay, you understand this is good. You want that. Try to get all the practices in place, because what works technologically the best may not work very nice editorially. As an engineer, if you ask me, I would say, write short articles, don't put too much text or HTML out there. Don't put images. Page will be fast. But as an editor, it's bad. As a journalist, it doesn't work nice, because the article loses its soul.
Sure.
So there is always this kind of a compromise between technology, content. So, but if you're doing the things correctly, then it should take about 2 to 3 months. You should start seeing some results. And most importantly, I mean, like one word, if I want to leave you with is, good content will always rule over bad content. You can't optimize bad content.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Message.
Yeah, and Abhijay, thanks for that question. That's I still call it a golden question. It always is for any marketer and any SEO professional.
Yes.
So with that, we come to a question from Setu Ramapuram. Thanks, Setu, which says, what are the opportunities and challenges for sites running in regional languages? Could you please share some tips on this?
Okay. For regional languages, see, nowadays, Google is now, like I said, Google is now going for semantic search. So meanings are important. So even for languages, there are buckets. So it's actually, I would say it's easier. So speaking from a purely European context, we have how many, 28 languages in Europe, prominent languages or more?
Something like that. Could be actually even more.
Even more, yeah. We have like dialects like Catalonian and something. Yeah. So we have this small tag called hreflang, which specifies which language your article is going into. You can translate the same article into 5 different languages, and Google will rank all the 5 articles separately within the same website, sometimes even within the same page. So you have to go local for regional. So if you're talking about, say, a topic related to international news, what Biden spoke to Z, may not rank so well in, say, South India, Tamil Nadu. Whereas what Karunanidhi said, what MK Stalin spoke, would be more important in Tamil Nadu. So that article would rank higher for Tamil searches as compared to Biden's e-talks. So you always keep in mind the local sensibilities. Don't worry, like I said, write for your users and Google will pick it up. Right. If your users are speaking in Malayalam, Tamil, or French or German, you write keeping those sensibilities in mind, and Google will reward you for that.
Sure. So we've run out of time, but a quick comment has come in from Murtala Kamara. Thanks, Murtala, who says, as professional journalists, we need to draw the line between facts and numbers. There are certain websites that are ranked high on Google, but some of their stories are fake. We also need to be careful, says Murtala.
Yeah, and that is one of the reasons why it is so important that the quality journalism also considers the search engine optimization, so that the good guys win, because that's a very important message in here.
Sure. I think somewhere Malay also mentioned that eventually, if you're giving fake content or not valuable content, Google will rank you down, right? So that this is going to happen. You can't play around with Google, is what, of course, Tommi, Malay have been saying. So that said, I think we've covered the questions so far. While we have run out of time, any other questions, please feel free to type in right here, or after the webinar, please feel to write to us. Having said that, as we come to the closure of this, closing comments, Tommi, on what does this search engine optimization then mean for journalists? Is it something they should be scared of? Is it something, like you said, they should take as an opportunity? They should go and learn search engine optimization technically, or what should journalists do about it? How should they look at search engine optimization?
So as I mentioned already before, so consider this as an opportunity. So there are things to win. And if you look at the list that we presented here today, it's not many things. And start by those. I mean, this can be, SEO can be studied endlessly. You can always learn more, and you can become more savvy with it. But start with this simple principle, and you have the low-hanging fruits on your hands.
Sure. I think I think that's that's put very precisely and kind of summarizes what we've been talking about. Anything that you wanted to add to that, Malay?
Yeah. So it's like Tommy mentioned in the beginning, it's a dynamic field. Everything changes. So on an average, Google introduces algorithm changes practically on a monthly basis. And we as SEO experts, we keep track of it. We try to keep our clients updated with the practices. So SEO is not your enemy. It's not something to be feared. If you just keep track, it's just like the trends, when you're writing articles also, you know what the public sensibilities are and you write accordingly. So you keep track of SEO also. Of course, just like just to give you one analogy, when smartphones came, when they became prominent 10 years ago, 15 years ago, people were very scared. Everyone used buttons. To touch a screen was very, uncomfortable. But now everyone uses it effortlessly. So SEO is also something like that. A little bit of adaptation is required. The world is digital now. So if you remember when you came to the school of journalism, you learned about the nuances of writing for newspapers, writing for magazines, as opposed to writing for books. So likewise, you need to learn a little bit about writing for the web. We have given you the guidelines. These are some of the guidelines. You can always keep yourself updated more and more. It's not something very difficult. We have given you a good baseline. You can continue further from here on. And of course, professionals are always there to help you.
Sure. Makes sense. So with that said, I think we are coming to the close of this webinar. And thanks for those folks who are posting thanks on the chat box, and to all the others as well who attended this webinar. Very insightful questions from all of you. A big thanks to Tommy and Malay for your time during the webinar. And before we sign off, just a quick call out. Quintype is going to be present at the British Journalism Awards, which is going to be held in the UK on 8th of December. So those of you who are making it for the event, please feel free to catch up with us. We'll be more than happy to kind of have a chat there. We have Mr. Bill McKim representing us there at the event. So that's about the British Journalism Awards. With that said, coming back to the agenda for today, thank you everybody for making time for this. Once again, thank you so much, Tommy and Malay.
Thank you, Anupam, and thank you everybody at the audience.